The comment that I hear most often about my garden is how lush and green it is. And I confess I live in an area with a lot of moisture. That helps tremendously. But I've also gardened in a high desert, so I know what it's like to be without a lot of water. And there is a way to have a lush garden no matter where you live. You don't have to have a swamp if it's a rainy area, and you don't have to have blank sandy desert with nothing growing in it if you live in an area with little moisture. The solution to both of those gardening dilemmas is the very same. See that little container right there? That's the solution, that little yellow container back there, which is full of compost. So we're talking about compost today, and I'm going to share what my community does and what I've done in the past and the future of composting in our country, which I bet you didn't even know that existed, but there is a future to composting. Hold on and I'll give you the details. Today happens to be trash day here in our community. We are in Northern Virginia in Arlington, Zone 7B, and in our community we have curbside organic pickup. So I have a bin for the trash, I have a bin for the recycling, and I have a bin for my organics. And I fill it up every week without fail. I also get from my county free collection bags. They also sell bags like this, these big paper bags at big box stores and all over the place. And my county picks up organic material with our garbage collection once a week. And what makes this program so exciting is they take away my compost. It does not cost me anything additional. It is part of my fee for garbage collection because over 30% of garbage that ends up in landfills is yard waste. So they'd be picking this up no matter what. But now they're picking it up and taking it to a recycling facility where it is then turned into compost. So the first thing that makes this successful is that it's extremely easy. If you want a good composting program, it needs to be easy to use. Second thing is I'm already paying for my trash collection, so it does not cost me any more to have my organics collected. So the next thing is it needs to be reasonably priced. So they take it away. And the third thing is that makes it really wonderful is this comes back to me in the form of free compost that I can pick up on my own and put into my flower beds. Now here's a little look. Now we've had a very rainy week. Now in case you're sitting there thinking, well, that would be nice if my neighborhood collected my organic material and returned it to me as compost that I could pick up and put on my yard. That would be dandy. But I don't have that. Well, I can relate. For years, when we lived in Colorado, we had 10 acres and 2 donkeys. Don't even ask about the donkeys. We had 2 donkeys. And we had a huge composting pile that I would say was probably between 200 and 300 square feet. And we piled up pine needles, because that's what we had, and donkey manure. And my husband, multiple times every year, would get out the rototiller and rototill and make compost. And one end was where you added the compost, and one end was where you took it out. And depending on where you were, which spot you were in, as to what would be happening, if you'd be dumping or picking up. So I know all about making compost. I have never had one of those small containers where you put it in like a little bin where you add it and turn it. I've always had way too much material to do that. Now you can see we have huge trees surrounding our house. And in this part of the world, if you live in a neighborhood named with a name that has forest in it, you know you're in an area with a lot of trees. And we live in an area where our neighborhood has the word forest in it. And the county for years has come by and vacuumed leaves. But this addition occurred, I would say, either 2016 or 2017, where they started recycling for us. When we first bought our home, these plants were a lot smaller, and the soil only had minimal compost on top of it. So my husband immediately determined he needed to add compost, and he adds compost at least once a year, just a couple of inches of compost on top of the ground as things are going to sleep. Usually it's somewhere Thanksgiving to Christmas. That's what he likes to do. And as a result, we have terrific soil. Every time we plant something, when we dig down a little bit deeper, we add more compost at the base if it looks like clay, because that's what we have is clay. And I'll show you this picture right here. This is the hole where we're going to be putting our pond, and you can very clearly see the layer of compost, about 6 inches, and then below it this red muddy clay. Now this is the rain we've been having. Clay does not drain, and so the water just sits and makes this horrible muck. And the compost helps the moisture to be absorbed instead of just sitting and turning into this horrible wet clay. If you have sand, like we had out west, the water drains through, so it immediately is dry even when it rains. And again, by adding the compost, it holds the water. So compost does two things. It keeps water in the soil, and it takes water out of the soil, which seems counterintuitive, but it's this magical substance. It also adds nutrients. This is the time of year. I'm just going to show you my hydrangeas are blooming, and they're absolutely looking beautiful. And this is the area where it's got some sun right now. It is late morning, and so we have some sun in here now, but this tends to be a really shady spot. And you can see there's a foxglove getting ready to bloom, and I pulled out all the daylilies and I have replanted. And as I've replanted and divided my hostas and my ferns and added some different things, I continue to add compost as I get down there. And the beauty of our soil is we have a zillion worms. So what worms do is they take the compost and they eat it, and the nutrients in the soil provide their food. And what they poop out, worm castings, are extremely fertile. So if you have fertile soil, you have a lot of worms, and they're very happy. But I thought you might enjoy seeing what is blooming around here. Here's the hydrangea that gave me one bloom last year, and it is full of blooms, and they're looking absolutely beautiful. So I'm quite excited about that. And over here, come around here where you can see my rhododendron is just barely starting to bloom. Now, where the storage shed is located was originally where the compost pile was in this yard, and it was just kind of, I think, some like garden timbers and the previous owner had piled up his garden debris, and the problem was it couldn't accommodate all the leaves. And that was the perfect spot to put our storage shed. So we put our storage shed there, and we said, now what are we going to do about the composting? And for a little while, the composting went here. There's our hole. I'm going to do a whole video when we get the pond going, but we've got a nice hole here. And you can see the layers of compost, the dark brown layers over the reddish layers, which are the clay. Now, in about 2016 or 2017, that's when our county implemented the composting with the trash service. And just a little history on this, there was a farm bill just about that time where they gave money to test and develop municipal composting programs, and it had a lifespan of like 5 years, and they were able to begin some composting. Now, it ended in 2023, so you're going, oh dear. It was only authorized to be used in 10 states. But what's happened, just in March of this year, there was a wonderful bipartisan bill passed in March of this year, 2024, called the Recycling Infrastructure and Accessibility Bill. It was a bipartisan bill with 3 senators, 2 Republican, one from Arkansas and one from West Virginia, and 1 Democrat from Delaware. And this created a pilot program, and it sounds like it's going to be administered by the EPA to improve access to recycling and composting in underserved communities. So if you're not living in San Francisco or Seattle or Portland or Arlington or one of those communities with wonderful service, this is the bill for you. One of the things they're supposed to do is explore the potential of a national composting strategy, and it requires the EPA to collect and publish data on composting and recycling. Now, there are currently 9 states with composting laws on the books: California, Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington State. There are currently 400 municipal programs serving 710 communities, and there has been a 49% increase in the composting in the last 3 years. This is a very growing industry. San Francisco has had an 80% reduction in trash sent to landfills. Their organics bins are larger than their trash bins to encourage people to put their organic material in them. Boston has free or discounted compost bins, although they're not collecting it for you, they're giving you the bins. New York State has required commercial producers of organic waste to use composting facilities, which offsets the composting costs for residential users. And by composting, if you're one of those people that cares about the earth, composting reduces methane. Now, interestingly enough, when organic material is put into a landfill and covered up, it's dark and it does not have oxygen, and it creates methane. But when you compost it, what happens is it tremendously reduces the methane. So, composting is far superior than just throwing it in the landfill. Now, the downside of these programs is there's always an upfront investment. If it's a community, then you're going to have to invest in the trucks to pick it up and the bins and a composting facility, which could be run by the local community or it could be run by a private entity. But composting is the wave of the future. And with these new programs that are being funded, communities have access to composting. So if you're going to get politically active about composting, now is the perfect time to do it. And that's what gardeners should be getting active about, right? So what you want is easy. People use it if it's easy. Curbside pickup is easy. You want it to be inexpensive. So if it's free or a part of your trash collection, that will encourage people to do it. And if you have free composting and mulch, here is some photographs of where I go to pick up my compost and mulch. I usually just use compost, but the mulch is here and some people pick it up. People show up with their bags or their bins and they fill them up. We can also have the county deliver it in a dump truck and they just pour it out in front of your house. You call up an order and they deliver it and then you can wheelbarrow it past. My husband does that once a year, but all through the year we collect our bins so that we have it on hand at all times. It should be convenient, it should be affordable. That's what makes it successful. This is the wave of the future. Now, you can look on all kinds of YouTube channels to show you how to create your own composting pile or a composting container. They have all kinds of cute things. But if you have a situation like mine with so many plants growing, it's not even an option. That's not even a possibility. I would have to turn my entire yard over to composting to take care of what falls out of my trees. But the county does it for me. I would love to hear what's happening in your community, what you would like to have happening in your community, and if you are beginning to see some of these ideas reaching out into underserved communities. The bill that passed back in March is called the Recycling, Infrastructure, and Accessibility Act. It has only passed the Senate. At this point, it is in committee in the House, where the House can make suggested changes to the bill. And anyway, it's a little confusing, but it kind of goes back and forth a little bit while the House and the Senate decide on which strategy to go for. But now is the time for regular people like gardeners to reach out to their congressional representatives and get their gardening friends to reach out too and let people know that you are interested in a national composting strategy. This would be a wonderful addition to any gardening community. So look into that. Reach out, see if it's something that your community might benefit from. Thanks so much, and I look forward to hearing how you're using composting in your yard. See you next time.